thing is that we got to get them out there and get them back. And that means I think we have to expand the scope of this thing. The other thing, just like you,
Call a special meeting of the MDC's Board of Finance to order, Monday, January 27th. It's after 5 p.m. Our start a little late. Are there any public comments relative to agenda items?
I have a question.
Okay, can you identify yourself so John can...
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It's Liz Tavelli, the independent consumer advocate. Hi.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know. I was reading through the report from the auditor, rather, by Clifton Larson. So about page 7 of the packet, and it says, although our audit planning has not been concluded and modifications may be made, we've identified the following significant risks of material misstatement as part of our audit planning. And then it notes management override of controls. It goes on. And I was curious if you could comment on what that means.
I'm not, did you get that, John?
Yep.
Can you just sort of repeat that for everybody? I mean, we don't usually comment on this stuff, but we can.
Yeah, this is John Merle. I think Attorney Tavelli was asking about the auditor's letter that mentions a reference to a potential significant risk of management of override of management control, or override of management internal controls, something to that effect. It's on the letter. I think it'll be discussed tonight.
It will be,
So
yeah.
it should be addressed.
Yeah, I do expect that it will be. I asked for that, so I do expect that it will be addressed when we get to that agenda item. If that's
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I just throw my comments in the public section in the beginning here, so I can get them in. I don't think I want to interrupt in the middle. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Are there any other?
Chairman Salemi?
Yeah.
I'd only just like to add, new consumer advocate, thank you for zooming in. But we typically don't have back and forth conversations with public who make statements or ask questions. We would respond in writing. So just for future, that we typically don't respond to the public asking questions in public comment session. We do that in writing. It's not a back and forth, just so you know that.
Yeah, we didn't expect to do anything that. We just wanted to make sure that you understood it is an agenda item. We will be talking about it. So that's, any other public comments?
Judy Allen, West Hartford. Just to clarify that our consumer advocate isn't a member of the public. She's, an equal partner in this process with board members. So I just wanted to clarify she's not a member of the public. Thank you.
Get a vote?
No. Can we have a clarification on that?
No offense, but I'm a member of the public, but go ahead. Alan, if you'd like to.
Get a vote?
What do you need to?
We've had consumer advocates come before us before, and they have an opportunity to present or question or whatever at a separate session. So I'm just confused as to, are we allowing, disallowing for future reference? Are we changing the rules somewhere? I'm just trying to understand what where we want to go.
I don't think we are. I think Liz, started to speak in public session. She let us know what she was concerned about, and I think we let her know that we're going to take care of it. So I wouldn't say that it was a report. She had a question, and she said that as soon as she started talking, she said, "I have a question." So
Right.
I'm sorry. I thought that that there was a call for public comments relative to agenda items. It was my understanding that was the appropriate time to state any questions that I had after reviewing the materials. Is that not a correct assumption on my part?
no, I thought you were right to ask. I I'd recognize you again if you do it, so. Is there anything else? Any other comments on, from public relative to the agenda items? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to just sort of a point of personal privilege. So this meeting is a special meeting because the originally scheduled meeting, was it January 6th? Or when was the originally scheduled meeting? The 30th?
No, the meeting was today, but at 5:30. We moved it forward because of.
No, but we canceled the last meeting because there wasn't a quorum. Was that the January 6th or something, or?
I believe so, but that was also a special meeting.
Yeah, so anyway, the point being is I would have mentioned this at the beginning of that, and it's basically an acknowledgement that we lost Commissioner Alphonse Murata. I know that many of the members, especially the Hartford members, know Al Murata very well, and I'd like to acknowledge it. I served for years with Al, and particularly the last few years, I know he had difficulty getting here. He had his, but he didn't want to miss the meeting, so he had his son bring him, and continued as long as he could until his health prevented him from coming. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that we lost him back in December, and it just I was always happy to serve with him. I thought he was a good commissioner. So
Yeah,
Commissioner DeBella.
he was having problems. Actually, it was his daughter that was dealing with on a day-to-day basis with him and preparing him for what he had to give for his meeting. She passed away a year and a half or so ago, and that's when he decided to leave the.
Well, certainly the Hartford commissioners, he's an icon in Hartford, and Hartford commissioners know him well for decades. So thank you for the personal privilege. So. Item number 3 is approval of minutes of the November 25th meeting.
So moved.
Motion,
Move it.
the second. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Commissioner Adel.
And I had forwarded this request to the clerk prior to the meeting tonight. We had a discussion about Bob Barron, his retirement, and it doesn't really reflect that in the minutes, so I was wondering if we should be adding, a summary of that discussion in here. And I would ask I would say the clerk that question.
Yeah, well, thanks, Commissioner Adel. I had the same thoughts on it. I know that the clerk in creating the draft minutes usually only puts things in that were actions, unless a lot of times we'll have a whole recitation of something that a member of the public might have said, and not necessarily what commissioners would have said. But I do feel that we should at least have the members of this board discuss this. I brought up the question at the beginning of the meeting about why Bob Barron wasn't in attendance. We were informed that he had retired, and I thought that I hadn't gotten any notice that he retired, and neither did this commission, or on this board. So that discussion, a whole discussion ensued about that. I've watched this video 3 times, and a discussion ensued about it, and eventually a question was asked whether or not there was a separation agreement, and I believe that the answer came from our district council that there was, and then the conversation ended with I think our chair saying that the agreement would could be discussed in executive session if necessary at the board level. So everybody knows everybody that's here knows that conversation took place. I mean, you watch the video, you can see it over again. I would say that we'd have to characterize what we want to say if we want to add it to the minutes. So I don't know, Commissioner Adel, you asked about this. Is there something that you think that it should say, or what? I mean, I think it should be acknowledged because without those questions, we wouldn't have learned about the agreement, so.
I don't feel comfortable, like, paraphrasing it at the moment. Is this something we can postpone or, and come back to after?
We don't have to change the minutes, and we certainly can, the subject of his retirement is still a subject, and I believe that, the Board of Finance could address, yeah, so, I mean, we don't want to have anything in the minutes, that's okay, but I did appreciate the opportunity to say that, recognize and acknowledge that we did have that discussion, and that we didn't get an acknowledgement that there was an agreement, a separation agreement. Are there any other additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Item number 4, consideration of potential action regarding approval for State of Connecticut financing for Clean Water Fund 4001-C.
Yes. Good evening, Commissioners. This is Diana Fay, Manager of Treasury. Today, we're seeking your approval to execute an IFO PLO agreement with the State of Connecticut under its Clean Water Fund program. The funds will be used to perform sewer rehabilitation and private property work in North Hartford in the areas of Durham, Woodstock, and Branford Street. The loan will have a principal amount of $1,135,560 at an interest rate of 2%. The state will also be providing about $2,059,000 in grants. And executing this agreement will also allow us to seek reimbursement for our expenses that we've already incurred. Any additional questions?
Welcome back, Diana Fay.
Thank you.
Now, are there any questions from any of the board members? No? Anything else, Scott, on this, or,
Nope, I think we're just happy she's home, back.
Yeah, well, everybody understands what the resolution is about. Does anybody need any explanation? But, okay, if we're okay with that, then we don't need a roll call vote, do we, Jay?
No, we need somebody to make a motion to approve.
Yeah, okay, so. Second. Motion's been made, seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Resolution carries, I should say. Item number 5 is the auditor governance communication. Says possible executive session. I didn't ask for that. I don't know how I got there, and I saw a note today that something about executive sessions. I didn't ask for an executive session, so.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, we had the presentation that the auditor is going to give today. We had a meeting with Commissioner Salemi, Commissioner Hoffman, and Commissioner Curry to talk about an issue we're going to talk about today, and we talked about doing it in the executive session, so that was our meeting last week. But we're happy to have that conversation openly today because we're going to be talking about it through the audit process. So, but we did talk about possibility of an executive session in that meeting that we had last week.
I didn't say that we didn't. I said I didn't ask for one. I didn't ask for one.
Okay, yeah, no, but we did talk about it. So, okay, great.
Actually, this the question that came up was actually a question from me. I know I sent it, and we talked about it with Mike Moore, and we also had I want to get her name right, Melissa Ferrucci. We also had Melissa Ferrucci at the meeting, and basically, this is a question that I asked last year as well. It had to do with management override of controls. And basically, also had to do with the MDC's charter provisions in Section 3, throughout Section 3, and in particular 3-8, regarding finance, and whether or not the auditors in their annual audit had reviewed the section on finance, Section 3 and 3-8, with respect to producing the audit. And so we can start by having staff explain some of this, but I did expect that we were going to get an answer from the auditors, from Clifton Larson Allen, regarding this. So.
Yeah, so if I may, in our meeting that we had last week with the staff and the commissioners that were present for that, we had Melissa Ferrucci there to talk about, we've asked CohnReznick to help us with the audit process this year. And so this question that's been lingering for a year or so more, we offered to allow CohnReznick, Melissa Ferrucci, to help answer the question. In addition to, we asked the same question of the auditor to answer the question. So we're prepared, happy to have the auditors answer the very same question, but we tried to, help with CohnReznick, which is our financial independent consultant, to answer the very question. I'm not sure if the auditors are prepared to answer that today or how they will answer it, but they're here, and you can ask them how that answer will get.
All right, let's try to do this then, okay? But I did in my message to you, Mike, and I did say that I was fine with Melissa's report, but I also wanted to hear from the auditors because that's where it started, and. So if we want to start with what she reported, and then you said that the staff may add something to that as well. So if you want to go ahead with that, the report was sent and dated January 24th, and it basically describes the limitations on expenditures that are in Section 3.8. So can you go through, let's take Melissa's letter and kind of go through that. Can you do that?
Sure. If you'd like, I can kind of just read some of the points from Melissa's letter. Is that
Sure.
the question? Sure. Okay, sure. So this is Mike Moore, MDC, controller. And so I have a copy of the letter here, which was submitted. And in the response that Melissa provided, she talks directly to Section 3.8. I think it talks about how this section of the charter states that MDC is not allowed to spend more than the approved budget in any function or department has designated in the approved budget without approval of the Board of Finance, or in absence of the Board of Finance, a vote of the district board. Therefore, if any function or department within the approved budget encounters the need to spend over the approved budget amount, a resolution must be prepared. It should include a certificate from the CFO that there's available unencumbered funds. And so that's, in a nutshell, I think the bulk of 3.8, which just talks about if we are to go over the budget in any department or any function, that would require Board of Finance approval. One question that came up was what defines a department versus a function. And so departments tend to be more, they're like payroll centric or headcount centric, so like engineering operations, whereas a function would be debt service or taxes or benefits.
All right, so there's really two things going on in 3.8, okay? And you just read both of them, okay? So, but basically there's two things. So one is transfers between accounts or among accounts or whatever, and it might be within a department, there might be from outside a department, but that is that the staff does have the ability, according to the charter, to make some moves without an approval of the district board.
That's correct, within a department. So transfers within the same department or function are allowable without Board of Finance approval. So for instance, within engineering, if we wanted to move from one account of engineering to another account, as long as we do not exceed the total budget for engineering, that's a transfer that will not cause us to go over budget. It's internal to a single department, and so that's allowed without Board of Finance approval.
All right, so the original question from me, it was, and this was to Bob Barron, last year, was so you do have the ability, the staff does have the ability to move some funds around when they need to, from one account to another, without changing the budget. But you can move some funds around, but it is reportable. It's not, you don't have to have approval in advance by the district board, but it is reportable at some point. And the question to the auditors was, if it's, how would you discover that in an audit? Is that discoverable in the audit that's performed by Clifton Larson Allen? Is a transfer discoverable? If we didn't see it, would they see it? Do they test for that? That was question number one.
2 questions.
Okay, and well,
And that's a question, that's a question for them. That's a
Yep.
question for the auditors, okay?
Yep.
Question number 2 was, in the second part of 3.8, is about funds that would be spent that in addition to the budget, so additional funds. And it talks about where you might get these funds from, from the fund balance, and that before you can do that, before you can take, and I don't believe that staff can do that without permission, but maybe they can. And that was my other question. It says the staff can do certain functions without. But my question to Bob was, and he didn't really answer for me, was that before you could take money from the fund balance, you'd have to present a certificate that there was an excess, or there were funds available in the balance. And then you'd have to get permission to take money. That's my second question from the auditor. Would that be discoverable? If somebody tapped into the fund balance, is that going to show up in an audit? So those are 2 questions for the auditor. So in Melissa's letter, if you think that Melissa's letter answers that somehow, I mean, I just said, I did, at the top of her letter, it says, I will want to hear directly from the auditors, but I'm willing to, if you can point out from her letter, that if she answers those questions, so.
yeah, I think within her letter, I think it answers the fact that the transfers can occur within department or function without Board of Finance approval, and it also answers that anything that's additional or supplemental to a department or function budget does require Finance Board approval. I think relative to the fund balance, I don't know if it specifically cites that in here. I think it may,
I think
I think it
3.8.
does.
I think towards the
3.8
end it does.
Yeah.
So it talks about how annually in the first quarter, we'll project what our funding surplus or deficit was for the prior year. And then based on that, we report what that surplus or deficit is on a preliminary basis. And then once the final audit results are complete in the May-June timeframe, that audited surplus would be certified. And then that's where we would say officially, this is what the surplus or deficit was for the prior year. And then that would be when we would be able to start to have discussions about what that surplus or deficit is and perhaps how to use that.
And if I may just add to that, Mr. Chairman. So we just talked about this tonight. We have, and it's unaudited, so $2.9 million in addition on revenues versus expenses on the water side. So we just mentioned that tonight. It's in my reports, right? We can't change that. And then the auditors are going to say, well, you were right or you were wrong. It was 2.9, it was 2.7, or it's 2.8, whatever the number is. So that number that we have in December or early January is what it is until it's audited. And I think the question, and I've tried to address this at a couple of different finance meetings. The MDC would never need to use fund balance during a year unless we exceeded the budget, right? So why would you need fund balance if you didn't exceed the budget? If a department or all the departments together cohesively are under budget, why would you need fund balance? There'd be no reason to spend money on fund balance. We agree, and I think Melissa's letter says, that if we needed to use fund balance, we would need board approval. But the only scenario to use fund balance, remember, the fund balance that we're presenting, I mentioned tonight, 2024, 2.9 million. It's not real until May of 25. And we don't use it in the 25 fiscal year, calendar year. We use it in, if the board so chooses, in the following year, just like we did last year. We had $5.5 million from 2023. We didn't use it in 24, we use it in 25, right? So that's the way the process works. But you look at, our projected expenses on a monthly basis on my reports. If you don't see that the departments are exceeding the budget, there'd be no rational reason to use fund balance because you're under budget, right? If we exceed the budget, and our monthly reports show that we exceeded the budget by $3 million, the question would be, well, what did you do? Well, we took fund balance. We need to report that to the board. So there's a lot of controls for you to look at the finance committee to say, here's how you can check to see if you've used fund balance. I would tell you, like we said in the past years, I just mentioned 2.9 million. So if in May the auditors say, yes, you had 2.9 million in December of 2024, and then in May we talk about this and said, well, there's really only $1 million left. Well, where'd you do with it, right? So we've documented through our own procedures and SAP, and then the auditors are going to verify that. And then if in the following year it's not there, the question would be, where is it?
Yeah, okay, Scott, let me just, you just said the magic word, so I didn't really ask about any of what you just talked about, and certainly didn't ask about the balance. Last year, we did have an issue where in your CEO report, you told us that we had $5.5 million surplus.
Mm-hmm.
And so we asked Bob about that, and he said, no, we don't. We, not until, as you said, not until it's certified. And so, but the question was not about what you talked about, like what you'd have to do, and that, the question was, are the auditors looking at what's the requirements of the finance section of the charter in section 3 and especially in 3.8? Are the auditors looking at? And Bob's answer was no, they're not. So my question is, why aren't they looking at it? He had said at the time,
I think
why wouldn't they?
No,
So let me finish asking, okay? So the question was, Bob's answer was, well, they only use the GASB standards. They're not looking at anything. They don't use any other standard. The charter can't supersede GASB and what. And my question was, if our charter says that this is the way that you have to manage, transfers or additional, funding or whatever, how are we going to know if that was complied with? Okay, so that was the question. If the auditors aren't looking at it, who is? So I think the auditors can look at it. I think they should be looking at it. And I don't think what Melissa told us is that they can't. I don't think she told us the same thing that Bob told us last year. But Commissioner Patel, you had your hand up. I'd like to make sure that we get the members of the committee to get their questions too, but go ahead.
In any budget, and I'm based on my city budgets, until year ends, you don't know that there was a surplus. And if there was a surplus, then at that time, department head was asked, what do you want to do? How do you want to handle it? Not before or during the period which you are talking about.
Okay, and that is not the question that I asked. I understand what you're saying. I'm not objecting to it or anything, but that's not what I asked. Alan Hoffman, you had your hand up. You do?
Yes, if Commissioner Patel's done.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. So in the meeting as described correctly by Scott, the conversation, as I recall it to be, is that there was a transfer that occurred within departments which was accepted as a normal practice. The other part of that question is, does the auditor have a test? And does the auditor, if so, use that test? And the answer, as I heard it from Melissa, it was no, we don't test. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That's
as
correct.
a misstatement.
That's correct. And what she said with the meeting was because it's, I hate to say this, but it's low in the weeds, right? The auditor's up here, and what we're talking about is, I'm gonna give an example in a department. A department might budget $500,000 for gasoline.
Yeah.
And they only use $400,000, but they are short overtime.
Yeah.
So they take $100,000 from their gasoline line item, and then they put it into their overtime budget. That does not need board approval. I've been here 19 years. It's never been done any other way but that, right? If that same department has same scenario, has $500,000 for gasoline, but they only use $400,000, they got $100,000, and another department needs overtime. We come to the board. The board approves that, and then we transfer that money. But I think what Commissioner Salemi's asking, and I was right, because I know what he's asking. He's asking is that when it comes to fund balance, when we have this X amount of money at the end of the year, hasn't been audited yet, is there any way that the auditors can or should be checking to see if we're using that money for something, whatever that is, without board approval? And I can only say that the auditor's here, and I'm not a CPA, and Mike, I would at this point
Scott, I'm just gonna have to, let me just say this. I'm not asking what you just said. What I'm asking is, does the auditor, what I asked Bob was, do they have a copy of the charter? I don't know why, I can't get this across.
They're here.
Do they have a copy of the charter?
They're here.
Do they understand that Section 3 of the charter has finance requirements in it? And are they, do they use the charter to basically to test whether or not the procedures are followed? That's part of their job. My understanding is part of their job as an auditor. The answer I got back was no, they don't use the charter. And so the question is, okay, well then who does? That's what's still on the table. Is anybody looking at what the charter said to do and making sure that that's being done, that's being accomplished? I didn't ask him about any single item. I never did that, okay? All I'm saying is, it seems to me that the auditors should have a responsibility to look at what our finance charter provisions say and make sure that they're being adhered to. So go ahead. Would you like to? Go ahead.
I would love to talk.
Please just introduce yourself to everybody.
Sure. So my name's Jessica Aniskoff. I'm what they call a signing director for CLA. So there's principals and signing directors. They're the same thing. Principals go out for new clients, signing directors service the clients we have. So my official title is signing director. I just wanted to clarify what the difference is for CLA, because everywhere else it's principal or partner. So I just want to go through the letter, and I think some of the points I'm going to bring is going to answer your questions. And if not, we can circle back to those specific questions.
Sure. Thank you.
Yep. So just to start, CLA was engaged to audit MDC for the year ending 12/31/24. So we will conduct our audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States, the standards for financial audits contained in government auditing standards, and the audit requirements of uniform guidance. That's your federal single audit. During the audit, we identify and assess the risk of material misstatement of the financial statements, and then we design and perform audit procedures in response to those risks. We do obtain an understanding of internal control to design our audit procedures, but we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the entity's internal controls. We do plan and perform our audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Now, what reasonable assurance means is it's a high level of assurance, but it's not absolute assurance. We don't look at every transaction. Just to, outside of the financial statement audit, we also have the federal single audit. So we do issue an in relation to opinion over the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. And an in relation to opinion means that those expenditures can be related back to the financial audit. We don't have an opinion on the expenditures themselves. What you're bringing up with the budget is what we call required supplementary information. So there's a paragraph, it's on page 4 of our letter. With respect to required supplementary information, which is your budget schedules and your pension and your OPEB RSI schedules, we do limited procedures, but we do not express an opinion on the RSI schedule. So we do not express an opinion on your budget. Moving over to the next page where we discuss management override of controls, that seems to be the topic that we're kind of going around today. So management override of controls is management's ability to manipulate the accounting records and or prepare fraudulent financial statements by overriding internal controls. So some of the things we do in the audit for the financials is we do some journal entry testing. We make sure that management is not solely making journal entries, that there's a control structure where someone is making it, somebody is reviewing it. We also do a GL completeness procedure where we make sure where we ended last year is where it started this year, and that we have all the information, that management's not hiding something in the general ledger from us. And then we also do an unpredictable procedure, which we change every year so management can't anticipate what we're doing. But these all relate to the financial statements and our opinion over the financial statements. We have started our planning procedures and we plan to issue by June 30th, hopefully around the May 30th timeframe. And this communication is our preliminary governance communication. It's our where we start our two-way communication with the board. Obviously, there's some questions that have come from the board. I just want to specifically go back to your questions on what we do test for that budget schedule. And we do not test the transfers. We do not test additional appropriations because that falls under required supplementary information. It's not, we do not give an opinion on your budget. It is something that we could do, but it's outside the scope of the financial statement audit. So we could do an agreed upon procedure if there were concerns from this board over the transfers and that those policies and procedures are being reviewed, but it's not encompassed in the audit because that schedule is required, but we don't have an opinion on that schedule.
Well, that is, and excuse me for interrupting you, okay, but that is the point at which the communications with last year with the chief financial officer sort of broke down on that because what you just said was basically if we asked you to, and we might have to pay you more than what we're paying you now, but if we asked you to review that part of the budget, you could and you
Absolutely.
would.
Yep.
And you're not saying that you totally ignore it. You're saying that it's just not a part that you test directly as part of the
Right.
audit.
So what we do with that budget schedule is we make sure that the expenditures column, that it can be tied back into the audit. So we don't go line by line and make sure every single expenditure on that schedule is in the proper department. That's not what we're doing. But we do look at it in total and say, yes, this was the total expenditures of MDC per the audited statements up front where we actually have an opinion.
And that's why the question was generated from that section about management override. That's where the question came from. Your governance letter last year generated that question.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean yours, but
Yeah.
but I don't know if you signed it last year or not. I
Yes,
don't
I did.
remember. Did you? Okay, so that's what generated the question.
Mhm.
And I think we do have a better understanding of it now, and I really appreciate, you being here to do that. I did ask commissioners if there, for other questions that they have, that they would like to ask the auditors. And I have some of them, but I don't think I want to ask you, I don't want to put you on the spot with that here, but I didn't get them in writing yet. I can ask the staff, and then maybe the staff can send them to you, and we can get those answered. And there were only two other ones anyway, two other questions. But I do appreciate, I think after all this time, getting that answer. And with respect to, any monies ever being spent from the fund balance, I've been here a long time, and, but I think Bill, I know Bill will remember this, and, Scott, you might have even been here, when we did this, but, do you remember when we had about a $500,000, additional expenditure on, copepods and rotophores, that, we spent over $500,000 more than the budget allowed, and I don't know where, and now it's back in 2006 or 7 or something. I don't remember where we got that, if we got it from the fund balance or not. But I think there was only one occasion in all the 30-something years that I've been here where the fund balance was tapped for something unexpected, and it might have been that. And I don't think
And if
it's
I may,
something
just to
else.
clarify, the fund balance is obviously sewer. That was a water, 500,000 for water. I don't believe we exceeded the budget in that year. We used existing funds to pay for that. But that
That's
is.
an additional expenditure of over $500,000 that we have to shuffle funds around to do.
Exactly,
Okay, so-
but in terms of using fund balance, we didn't use fund balance because it's sewer and it's, this is a water,
Well, we
event.
we don't call it a fund balance in water. And you
Net
just talked
position.
about it tonight.
Net
The net
position,
position
yeah.
is, we're $3 million in
Well,
good
that's-
in the net position.
Well,
It
that's-
hasn't been verified yet,
That
but
$2.9 million will go to net position. I mean, unless the
Yeah.
board decides to use that money for whatever reason, that would land in net position. Net position is almost identical to fund balance, but it's on the water side. But we will, once we have the audit, and just to add, I mean, we did submit the questions that you asked directly to CLA through Mike, and so you had those questions that was requested to be answered. But yes, I mean, if the board so chooses to say, we have a specific concern or a general concern, and we want CLA to do something more, it's outside the realm of the requirement of an audit. But
Right, it would
not,
be what we call an agreed upon procedure, where we would outline specifically what the
Yes.
board would want us to look at, and that's what we would look at.
okay,
yeah, I just, I've never asked for that either. I just wanted to make sure that we had, the opportunity to have somebody explain who is using the charter to manage the budget and to also to manage reporting on the budget. And what you told me is that you don't exactly test these little individual items, but there is there is oversight and with on management controls of
Over financial.
override. Yes. So thank you. Anybody else have any other questions? I had a couple others that we can. I think we can get the staff to do it some other time maybe for us. If we can move on, so you're underway with the audit already.
Yeah, so we've started our preliminary procedures, and then we'll start what we call final field work in the March, April timeframe. That's where we'll do the bulk of the audit. Right now, we're doing a lot of the planning and internal controls reviews and those types of things. And then we'll do the substantive procedures March and April, and hopefully have a draft in the May timeframe. That's our timeline right now, so
All
and it
right.
has to be issued by June 30th.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. Really appreciate you doing that. And I also want to thank Melissa. She's not here, but I mean, I want to thank for the work that she did on this too.
and if I may, Mr. Chairman, we'd like to, so, because this happened once, a number of years ago, but, and Jessica, if you can just explain, like, the audit's done, and they have to issue it by June 30th. I mean, you have no choice, right? But to the courtesy to the Finance Committee, we would like to at least, before we issue it, that we at least get a chance to update the Board of Finance about, what the audit says before we issue it, because I know Commissioner Hoffman was not very happy 3 or 4 years ago when we issued the audit, but the Board of Finance meeting delayed about 2 or 3 days. So we'd like to make sure that we have a Board of Finance meeting before it gets issued on June 30th, so that you have a chance to see
I
it.
think last year we did it in May. We did
Yes,
it
no,
in
we
May.
did, but
Yeah,
there was
yeah.
2 or 3 years ago, we understand
Okay.
what's important, so we'll have you back.
We would issue a draft, and then that would be, in theory, the final version that we can then stamp
All right.
the issue date on after your meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
And does anybody have any questions for staff about the upcoming audit? Or, okay, as I said, there were some other questions, and I'll work with staff in getting that done. I don't want to slow everybody down here tonight. Item number 6, the annual report submitted to the Office of Fiscal Analysis. John, I wonder if you could put that report up on the screen. Is there some way we can do that?
We can do that.
Because it was 68 pages, so I wasn't gonna, if the district's not gonna print it for me, I'm not printing 68 pages on my printer, so.
Thank you.
Maybe you could explain, John, what this report is. It basically responds to a public act. It's a requirement.
Yes.
You can do that?
I know of the report loosely. It was Public Act 14-21 required this report be filed with the Office of Fiscal Analysis and some other offices, I believe with the General Assembly, and it has specific information that they require to be included, in financial information and the affirmative action plan. And that's been submitted every year since 2015.
And if I may add
Yeah,
to that,
sure.
this was a reaction to the issue regarding the MDC increasing the customer service charge to non-member towns. So that was a reaction from that. And I don't remember the dates, but we were required to submit a very similar document to PURA. And we were doing that forever, but it's almost identical type document to PURA. And then there was legislation passed around the same time frame that eliminated the need for MDC and municipalities like ourselves to submit those. We're not regulated by PURA, but we still had to submit the report. And so we don't submit a report anymore by statute to PURA, but we do submit this report to the entities we just talked about.
They're basically state agencies, so the report gets submitted to us.
We never submitted.
There are sections in the report, as John mentioned, there's some sections in there that have to do with, reports on affirmative action, human resource type reports on hirings, firings, resignations, retirements. So if we could just, I know the first 60 pages are all finance things. I don't know if anybody got a chance to review all of those yet. I mean, we've had this report with the agenda, so are there any questions about that part? I mean, I had some questions about the second part, which had to do with the affirmative action plan, but go ahead, Commissioner Adel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed on the last page, I think, that on the personnel status report, we had 32, in 2023, we had 32 retirements. Seems high, but people are going to retire, that's for sure. But we also had 29 separations, and that just seemed awfully high to me, and I was just wondering if we could get some more detail on that.
It seemed a little high to me too, but is there a way we can, you can get an explanation on that? I mean, if they in the report, it's page 68 of the report, basically the last page.
Yeah.
That, I believe it calls them, the word it's used is separation. So does somebody want to explain, I'm sure that there are various different ways that people leave here that's not retirement, so.
Well, Jamie's not here tonight, so we're happy to respond. We'll send information to the commissioners and answer your questions, but Jamie's not here tonight.
I think we'll start with what's the definition of separation?
Yeah,
right? What's
exactly.
included within that
Yeah.
concept,
Yeah.
Right.
and then go from there.
Okay, thank you.
But we're happy to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I think that, given the topic of separations and separation agreements, I think if we're going to answer that question, I'd like to also know if there are any other separation agreements besides the one that was described to us. Have there been any other ones? I mean, it calls them separations. I don't believe that there's a separation agreement for every one of them, but there might be another one, and I'd appreciate knowing if there are any others.
Okay.
And also with respect to the fiscal analysis, so the retirement or pension section of the retirement, the auditor, we just had the auditors here talking about what they look at and what they don't look at. Who performs the oversight or audit of the pension fund and its operation? I mean, it's done here. Pensions, administered by our staff. Is that,
Well, we have our consultant, which is the HOB, and we also have our consultant, which is who does our calculations, our online calculations for pension.
We have
yeah,
our,
the HOB manages the
fund.
investments in the fund, but I'm
Right.
talking about managing the plan itself and payouts and
Yep.
determining what they are and so forth.
Yep.
Hold
We have our HR department that assists, but we have a pension administrator. We pay a third-party pension administrator, which is Milliman. So they're managing the pension administration. The dispersing company is Aetna that disperses our pension checks. But our HR department works with Milliman on the pension administration and the calculations.
If you remember, Commissioner, we presented on this. Milliman was doing this for years for us, but only did a piece of it, only did a portion of it, but there was a lot of calculations done by HR staff themselves. Bob, my good friend Bob Zyke, who retired, we presented here at I think PPI and the full board, and proposed to use the consultant Milliman in this case to actually use their computer system, and she did. I think she did a presentation of the system and how it works. And so Milliman, it's a self-service portal where people can go online, can actually can do their own estimates, but then the calculations are done by our consultant, and then they work with HR staff to all the payouts and all those good things.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
I'm very familiar with. I remember when we put them on to do this and everything. My question was really is about the auditor doesn't test the pension system, or do they? They do or they don't? I'm just curious.
They don't, but we have our actuary as well, which is now USI, which does all of the calculations and brings it forward to you at different times of the year, and does all of the calculations for the pension and the OPEB, and does the liability determinations and the ADEC determinations for the following year. That meets with you in the Finance Committee as well as the PP&I, I believe. Or maybe the PP&I.
It's PPI
PPI.
and the full board.
Yep, thank you, Kel. Yeah, PP&I has the pension, is basically the pension thing, so. Mr. Taylor?
Milliman is no longer with us.
We do have Milliman as our third-party pension administrator.
Both is still with us.
That's,
But
yeah,
otherwise,
no, but
I don't-
they're not doing all the functions they did
Exactly.
before, but they are doing this.
And our actuary is now USI, who
Right, they were-
replaced the actuary Milliman, yes.
Yeah, so,
There's two pieces to Milliman,
Yep.
the actuary piece and the retirement piece.
Okay, I appreciate, everyone's patience and trying to get these questions about the audits answered. I started it last year, actually the year before or before the audit of last year, on a number of occasions, and I think that possibly again this year, there have been attempts to pass legislation that would require us, the MDC, to be subject to the Auditor of Public Accounts on an annual basis. And I just want to make sure, I started out wanting to make sure that everybody knew that we're already audited just about every way we can possibly imagine. And I think we respond to them, and I think we've always had very good results in all the audits that are done on the MDC. I think the staff does a great job, and I think that Scott mentioned when we had our meeting that Cone Resnick has been a great addition to, or resource, I should say, for the staff, that they've been extremely helpful in the last 3 years, is it, or 2 or 3 years?
Well, yeah, I mean, we had them, we used them a lot in the 2018-19 timeframe.
We had a bigger thing going on.
Right,
then.
we had a different issue there.
Yeah.
But we didn't have to use them at all last year, and we're just using them, as we mentioned, because Bob's retirement. We want to help facilitate the audit, and we need to give, the support to Kelly and to Mike and to staff, and so that's why we've got them here. It's a limited exercise, but I did ask Melissa when she was here in 2019, and as part of, as you know, as part of the deliverable for 2019, Cone Resnick actually developed, in this board, I think PPI and the full board approved the internal controls and the procedures and policies for each of the different departments: Treasury, accounting, comptroller, and budget. And so they had lots of recommendations on what we should do and how we do it, and checklists and all those things. So I've asked her to just look at that, at a 30,000 foot, just to see what she sees, and if there's anything we're not doing that we should be doing. We'd like to get some feedback from her as part of that exercise. So.
Well, I think that it just, adds to what I said, and I said that my concern would be, what more do we need to do, or what more could anybody, discover about us with any other type of audit? And I don't know, maybe it's just a perspective thing from someone else, but I'm satisfied that all the members of this board not only know what our financial position is, but how we come to understand it. And basically, that the audit that we provide and all the budget advice and all the work that we provide is tested, and then our responsibility is to oversee that gets done. So I'm satisfied. I think that we got all the way there with this, and hopefully, we're going to keep moving forward with this. I do want to see what happens at the legislature if another request for us to go to the Auditor of Public Accounts comes up. I guess we can deal with it when it comes up.
And we're happy, Mr. Chairman, we're happy if, as we pay the auditor about how much, $170,000 a year to do this audit. And so if the Finance Committee so chose and said we want to look at this, whatever this is or that, we just need to identify the funds and get a scope from Jessica, and we're happy to do any kind of audit. I think it'd be helpful for anyone that the board trusts, whether it's Cone Resnick or whether it's CLA. And I use this example for the Board of Finance to look at things to say, what's the measuring stick, what's the metrics? And as I mentioned earlier, is you have a budget, you have a projected budget, and you have an actual budget, and you can look and see if we're exceeding the budget in any given month. And The telltale sign for the finance committee would be if a department is over its budget, the budgeted amount within there, and we're not coming to the Board of Finance, that's a red flag. That's a concern. So we do and have always come to the Board of Finance and the full board to transfer money per the charter. And that's the way we do it. We've always done it that way. And we don't use fund balance without the board approval, right?
Scott, I think you answered that question.
I just want to be clear.
Enough times, and
because I got emails
I don't know why
flying
you
around.
keep bringing it up. I didn't ask it again, and
I'm hearing you, but I got emails
I didn't
flying
hear
around.
anybody else here ask it either.
We got emails flying around,
but,
so we'll have to respond.
Have to respond to what? Honestly, I got the questions answered finally, and I appreciate it, but they didn't have anything to do with that. We're still on commissioner requests for future agenda items.
Public comments.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, in 25 words or less, whoever answers this question, and I'll try to be brief. I understand that CLA will continue to do our audit, start to finish. CohnReznick had been engaged to do a particular project, XYZ, and that has completed. I also understand that they have been re-engaged, and so my question for 25 words or less is, what exactly are they re-engaged to do?
So I hope that you start counting. Start counting. We've asked.
It's supposed to be for future agenda items, Alan.
Well, this
Yeah.
could be a future agenda
Do
item.
you want me to answer?
I mean,
It's up to you. I can answer. It's up to you.
I think it's a long answer, but.
No, it's a quick answer.
Okay.
25 words or less.
Please, given the fact Bob Barron retired, we wanted to have CohnReznick here to make this committee and the full board comfortable that we're doing everything we can to facilitate the audit. And we wanted to have, because CohnReznick, Melissa specifically, she worked here for almost 3 years in 2019. She knows the staff, she knows the people, she knows how we do things. She helped develop all of the procedures and policies for our internal controls. So that's why we've asked her to be here, to help with the audit.
That was more than 25 words. but,
That's all right.
you know.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other questions? Any other, basically requests for future agenda items?
Gotta go back to general public.
Here we go.
comments. You missed general public comments, right? Or did you say it? I missed it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Opportunity for general public comments. I'm sorry, I went right to. Are there any general public comments? Any general public comments?
I realize I'm out of order, but,
You're not out of order. You
Out
can
of
be.
order.
well, I'm not a member of the public, but just to back up, just a clarification of what Scott said. Why would you need CohnReznick here to assist with the audit? Given the retirement, I understand, of our past finance director, when you have a finance division.
Yes, if I may.
Sure.
I mean,
I agree. I have full support in our staff to do this audit. However, our CFO, which is, we don't have a CFO.
Right.
So to make this board and the full board comfortable that we're doing our jobs, I think it's paramount that we have the support of CohnReznick, which is independent. They're not staff, they're a consultant. But to have, to not have our CFO, the comptroller, which is the manager, which Mike is the party that is responsible to the auditor, but not having our CFO, during the audit. I felt very comfortable bringing in Melissa at a very limited, I'm sorry,
Capacity?
yeah, limited capacity. And so it's belts and suspenders, but I think it's appropriate.
And, Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner, I would only add to what Scott said. We did have a meeting with them, and I do believe that, that there's a function that they provide. In as much as, you know, any department that loses its chief officer is, you know, still capable of producing the work that they're supposed to produce. The sort of direction that they need to go in and the assurances that they are producing what they're supposed to are not there when you don't have the chief officer. So I do think that what Scott described, at least in part of what CohnReznick is doing is that. So they're just making sure that everything continues to operate the way that it's supposed to be. And I felt very comfortable in discussing that issue with them at the meeting that we had. So if there's anything else, please go ahead.
Well, it kind of begs the question, are we going to have an acting finance director, or there's a search on currently, I assume, for a finance director, so it may overlap, but if someone comes in from the outside to acquire that role, they would have to come up to speed with the
Yeah, I think that we did discuss that.
We did discuss
We
that.
did discuss that, and I think that the situation that we're in right now, when we're trying to respond to the auditors and get it kicked off and everything, I think that it won't be long before we start to determine what kind of process we're going to have to select a new CFO. I think it's not the kind of thing that we want to do in a hurry, and we don't have to. So I do think that it is. I wouldn't say that it's really underway yet, but we do have an acting. Didn't we?
No, we don't have an acting CFO, but everything falls under Kelly Shane, who's our chief administrative officer. But Commissioner, we did have this conversation last week, and we are thinking about that very timeline. We're also consulting with Melissa as well, because she knows the staff so well. She knows the departments. We're looking for a little guidance from her as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. I think I asked 3 times, but I'll ask one more time. Are there any other public comments? Okay, well, hearing none, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Excellent.
Without objection, meeting's adjourned.